Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser.
I'm Stacy Herbert.
Talk to me, babe. I understand this is our 200th show.
It's the bicentennial, and for it, the global insurrection against banker occupation is raging this week. They're in Athens in the streets. 10% of the population is out there, Max, for the 200th episode.
Wow, that's fantastic. And, you know, the whole point of it is to bring about a global insurrection against banker occupation. And, you know, of course, it started in North Africa, Middle East. Then it heated up in Europe. Then it swung over to New York under Occupy Wall Street and these other Occupy movements. And now it's, I think, really raging back to Europe. And I think Athens could be the first country to trip a banking collapse and a European banking collapse. If these unions stay out long enough, they will trip banking catastrophe, and that's what we want.
Well, for our 200th episode of the Keiser Report, there are some more presents here, Max. Giabo makes it to the Urban Dictionary. That's the global insurrection against banker occupation. Giabo is a movement and soon to be PAC that advocates for the people against the large banks that have come to occupy every level of government and influence around the globe. Let's go, Giabo.
Yeah, Stacy Herbert, you and I have permanently transformed the vocabulary of what people use according to Urban Dictionary, which of course is the People's Dictionary. So global insurrection against banker occupation, we introduced that term on this show. Now it has become part of the vernacular of this global insurrection against banker occupation.
Well, I also put out there on Facebook and Twitter for inviting people to send in their artwork. And this image here is from Michael Denning. Every revolution needs a man with a vision. Keiser Report. And you see the RT logo down there on the left, and you also see 200.
Well, RT deserves big kudos because they have covered this global insurrection unlike any other network in the world. You know, it's becoming really their signature, and they are trouncing the competition because they were totally ahead of the crowd. Now the mainstream in the US and the UK is just waking up to what RT has been covering for months.
Well, let's talk about why there is a Giabo, why there is a global insurrection against banker occupation. Eurozone pushing for tougher policing of Greece. According to this Reuters article, some Eurozone countries want a European Commission task force to be given extra powers to oversee the sale of Greek state assets and the country's civil service under a far-reaching plan to tighten supervision of Athens. The source said there was a need to take over some of the sovereign functions of the state to get the machine running. The proposal would involve sending hundreds of these austerity police force, is what you can call it, to Greece.
This is exactly what we warned about. When we were down in Greece, we told the people directly, face to face, that they were going to lose their sovereignty, that the outside banking collective would take their assets based on debts that they themselves imposed onto Greece, that Greece never imposed on themselves. And now they're going forward, and they will use force. This is worse than the junta. The troika is much worse than the junta.
Well, exactly. And the protests this week in Greece were bigger than the ones in 1974 when the junta was forced to leave. But listen, this source told Reuters, the idea is living in some capitals, this idea that there needs to be an austerity police force. There is no alternative.
Oh, ding dong, hello, Margaret Thatcher. Remember during the beginning of the Reagan-Thatcher era, which incidentally in the US was the beginning of the bailouts for banks. Reagan initiated this whole bank bailout initiative, and at the time he said, oh, well, it'll never happen again. But of course it became the precedent for how America does business going forward. But Margaret Thatcher said this, there is no alternative. TINA, as it became known. And this was a falsehood then. It was merely a pretext to bring in financialization, to replace manufacturing, gut the economy, put millions of people out of work, and if they complain, start wars and send them off to foreign countries and get them blown apart. Now they're repeating TINA. There is no alternative. There was an alternative then, and there is an alternative now. It's called insurrection.
Well, exactly. Lady Liberty should go beat the out of TINA because she is with the monarchs of the global financial system. TINA is the one telling us there is no alternative but subjugation and slavery. They
can't stand. And the people of Greece now, the ball is going back into their court on the global insurrection against banker occupation, and they have it within their purview, within their wherewithal right now to trip banking catastrophe in Europe to save their sovereignty. Get to it!
Now, if Americans think they're not going to be confronted with Tina, Bank of America takes sleaze to a new level. Yes, Bank of America quietly moved $53 trillion in derivatives from its holding company to its subsidiary that holds $1 trillion in customer deposits and is insured by the FDIC. If any part of these derivatives blow up, the taxpayer will then be on the hook for the $1 trillion in deposits.
This is just another example of abusing all the non-existent banking regulations to benefit insiders in the banks like Bank of America, of course, now it's part of Merrill Lynch, and a couple of other banks they threw in there. And they're using this technique of playing musical chairs with trillions and trillions of debt. The goal, of course, is always to get that debt lined up with depositors and then rape the depositors unmercifully and with extreme prejudice.
Well, Tina, there is no alternative. Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan, who set in motion this banking catastrophe we have, were also present during the collapse of communism, where the system collapsed because the people just stopped working and then rebelled against the oligarchs who were taking everything. Well, we see that same situation happening today, Max. Here are some really interesting headlines from America. Toll of heavy drinking on U.S. economy rises. So heavy drinking is costing the U.S. economy more than $200 billion a year, mostly in lost workplace productivity, a U.S. health agency said on Monday. This is nearly 21% higher than the last time they did this study in 1998.
The Cold War ended and Russia won because effectively America continued its Cold War economic policies of price fixing and crowding out of productive economic activity in favor of the oligarchy, Federal Reserve banking, economic non-entity.
Well, the fact is, Max, if you look at the charts of U.S. productivity since Tina arrived on the scene, every single dollar of productivity, every single one of those dollars went to the top 1%. So why be more productive in your work? Why not show up drunk? Why not stay home with a hangover? Why turn up to work when the oligarchs are only going to take that money and use it to increase their power, to buy more Ronald Reagans, to buy the next politician?
Well, yes. When I was working on Wall Street, I was at a firm called Oppenheimer, and famously, when I was there, one of the brokers fell over drunk and hit the floor and passed out. The manager at the time, by the initials DT, simply walked over, picked him up, put him back in his chair, put the phone in his hand, and dialed the phone and said, "Keep dialing, son." So in other words, drunk, drug-addled automatons whose sole purpose is to financially rape people is the model, and it's continuing unabated because nobody in Washington, or no regulation, is stepping forward to stop.
This propaganda in this article continues that 72% of this alleged lost $180 billion cost was due to lost productivity, and most of the cost was borne by the drinkers themselves in the form of lost income. But like I said, that lost income, you should just lose that income. Continue to drink more. If this is the way that Americans can respond like the Greeks and take down the banking system, them just staying home drunk.
Well, remember the cigarette companies, their argument for why they should not be forced to outlaw cigarette smoking is that cigarette smoking killed so many people per year that the economy ultimately would save on healthcare costs. Now, yes, if people drink themselves to death, they're going to save money in healthcare costs. That's true. If people are sent to foreign occupations and get murdered for no reason other than to make bankers a few bucks, so yes, that I suppose could be the basis of your economy. But how is that different than, let's say, running a concentration camp or Pol Pot or anybody else, these other dictators? How is Hank Paulson, a Lloyd Blankfein, and Jamie Dimon not a mass murderer? Send me an email right now to explain that to me. I don't see the difference.
Well, in fact, Max, you could call Lloyd Blankfein. Here's a headline: Call Goldman Sachs CEO Lloyd Blankfein on his cell phone and cheer him up. The number is 917-743-0939. I'm sure he has a new one by now, but apparently somebody released his cell phone number into the public domain. And the reason why they're saying you should cheer him up is because Goldman Sachs just reported a nearly $500 million loss in the third quarter. Some of the suggested messages are, I know you just lost $500 million, but look on the bright side. You've set aside $10 billion in bonuses to pay out to your 34,200 employees. Or, hey, just do what I do when I run out of money. Head over to the Fed's discount window and borrow more at no interest.
Well, it's amazing that Goldman can lose any money. I think they just do that for show. Because, for example, we know through high-frequency trading, they steal $100 million a day on the New York Stock Exchange floor, gratis, no cost for that whatsoever. And all the other government programs they get bailed out on, and all the risk arbitrage, positive interest rate, cash flow, currency spreads that they put on every single day, or the volatility spreads that they get paid on every time they announce false rumors or manipulate the market in some way. So these losses are just for show. They're hoping to keep their heads attached to their bodies. Will it work? I doubt it.
If they're going to live by the fraud, they should die by the fraud. But one more sign of this, the collapse of America. Just 1 in 7 U.S. workers are normal weight without chronic health issue. So Gallup estimates that 450 million days of work a year are missed because of weight and other health problems, resulting in an estimated cost of $153 billion in lost productivity. Again, that's good. You don't want that money going to Lloyd Blankfein anyway. He would just use it to hire a mercenary army to go overthrow some other government somewhere and steal their oil and resources.
Well, in order to have a competitive economy, you need to attract the competitive elements in the economy. Let me explain something. People in America who would be competitive and create jobs, create companies, create growth, are not doing so because it's not competitive. It's so easy to just put on an algorithmic trading program and make a few $1 billion that it doesn't attract any real competitors. I mean, myself, for example, I could be over there doing jobs, creating companies, and hiring people if it was competitive, if it was interesting. But it's so uninteresting that it's not even worth my time. How to make it interesting? Start raising interest rates. This would weed out all of the posers and the Lloyd Blankfeins and the Jamie Dimons who don't really compete. They're just sucking on the government teat. And it would bring in real competitors, people like myself, for example. But until that happens, I'd rather just sit by the sidelines and watch the whole thing collapse.
Well, apparently a lot of people are showing up at work and just sitting on the sidelines. It's called presenteeism. And they said if you counted that the losses in productivity to the U.S. economy could be as high as $1.1 trillion.
Trillion here, trillion there. Eventually it adds up to real money. Okay, Stacy Herbert, you're coming back for part 2, aren't you?
I was going to occupy Keiser Report as a special Giabo episode, but you let them know.
All right, stay tuned. Hi, Max Keiser. Welcome back to part 2 of the Keiser Report special, Global Insurrection Against Banker Occupation, show number 200 special. Double header with Stacy Herbert.
Yes, Max, I'm occupying Keiser Report for the second half.
Yeah, baby.
So I also did, invite comments and questions and images and artwork for this special Keiser Report, episode 200. And we have a statement on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Keiser Report, from John Michael Orr. He said, "The Keiser Report is the best show in any form of media, period. I hope you and Stacy can become the anti-Wall Street's John and Yoko."
We already are heading in that direction. There's a film we're making in Amsterdam, room 702 of the Amsterdam Hilton Hotel. We're going to have a bed-in where we're going to give financial peace a chance. Max and Stacy in bed, finally. And this will be the topic of a special Keiser Report coming up in the not-too-distant future.
Let's talk about Amsterdam a little bit more. There was Occupy Amsterdam, and I wanted to call your attention to this video that was sent in to us from Occupy Amsterdam. And you see there, notice that sign there in the background, Max. It says, "Crash JP Morgan, buy silver." That is, of course, something we launched here on the Keiser Report, the beginning of the global insurrection against banker occupation in the West.
That's right. We've launched The crash JP Morgan buy silver campaign, the price of silver doubled. Now it's up about 50% from where we launched that campaign. We talked about another very important campaign, how to leverage the global insurrection against banker occupation without actually spending any money at all, but by focusing very specifically on a global boycott that would decapitalize one of the biggest companies in the world, Coca-Cola, and then inviting hedge funds to simultaneously sell short that stock to create a pincer movement to obliterate that company. That's another action the Occupy movement could take without spending any money.
But going back to the crash JP Morgan buy silver, JP Morgan is the Federal Reserve. JP Morgan is involved in manipulation. This is the heart of the global financial crisis. This is the banner under which they all fly, the TINA. There is no alternative but our fraud. So this is why buying silver, we remove a weapon in the arsenal of the global banking fraudsters, which is the US dollar and the derivatives and the amount of unlimited shorts they can place on silver.
Well, let me just follow up on that, because there is a movement, there is an idea circulating amongst all the various global Occupy chapters to pull money out of the bank and put it into maybe a credit union or a bank that's not part of the too big to fail banks.
That's November 5th. They're doing the pull your money out of the banks.
Now, we've already seen people try this a couple of times, and it doesn't really work so well because you're just shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic, aren't you? It would only make sense if you pulled out that cash and bought silver or gold. Then you've actually done something that threatens the system.
But you also remove yourself from a fraudulent system. So, for example, Occupy Wall Street has raised donations of $300,000. Now, Terry Boole, who we've had on the show often, she's in her investigations learned that Amalgamated Bank, the community bank in which Occupy Wall Street has placed their money, is now under FDIC investigation for creative accounting.
Right, this is the problem. Like I said, deck chairs rearranged on the Titanic.
Okay, so here's another image sent in from John Krause in Florida, and it combines these two things, the Silver Liberation Army and Giabo, the global insurrection against banker occupation. History made fresh daily. Rise Up, MaxKeiser.com, and RT.
Excellent artwork. Keep it coming.
Yes, send more. So I want to turn to, we were talking about fraud, and I want to turn to this little clip with William K. Black, who we've had on this show. He's the former banking regulator who saw 1,500 plus bankers sent away to prison for fraud in the 1980s, in the beginning of TINA on the scene. And let's turn to this clip here on the Dylan Ratigan Show.
Only about a month ago, the Federal Housing Finance Administration filed fraud complaints, civil ones, against 17 of the largest banks in the world, in which it said there is a paper trail that demonstrates the fraudulent intent of these banks. Well, where is the Justice Department? And for that matter, where's Paul Krugman, who can't be bothered to use the F word?
Yeah, well, Bill Black, our buddy Bill Black, good point. New York Times, Paul Krugman, how come they're siding with the terrorists? Also, it puts into context the recent comments by Barack Obama that the banks committed a moral transgression but did not break the law. Here's the top government regulator, Bill Black, from the 1980s saying it's definitely fraud. They definitely broke the letter of the law. And Obama, if you are down with someone breaking the law, that's an impeachable offense. Why is he still in office?
Yeah, but Max, this guy, Bill Black, is saying that it is the economists like Paul Krugman who provide the systemic propaganda for the population. He's the one who refuses to use the F word. If you're not going to use the 5-letter F word, Paul Krugman, you might as well use the 4-letter one.
Woo, doggy.
Okay, well, let's move on to the fraud that dares not speak its name. QE pushes families into debt, warns Bank of England Governor Sir Mervyn King. So Max Keiser, what do you think about this? This issue, savers versus speculators. And here is Mervyn King saying that, in fact, quantitative easing, which is meant to cover the fraud of the banksters, in fact, will make the situation worse for the average population because it encourages them not to save and, in fact, to spend more.
Financial oppression. That's what it's called. The Bank of England has adopted a policy that is purposefully oppressive
Yes.
That's not in keeping with what you'd expect in a representational democracy. You don't vote for dictators whose purpose is to oppress and repress you to benefit their kleptocratic brothers and sisters, Mervyn King, kleptocrat in chief.
And what do the likes of Mervyn King and the top 1% that he represents, what do they keep saying about those 99% that are now complaining? They said, you're the one that took on this debt. You're the one, therefore, who should be responsible for it. Well, here is Mervyn King, who is telling you, I am forcing you to either take more debt or die.
Yes, this is a classic case of scapegoating. And we've seen this before during repressive, oppressive regimes. They steal the money from one group, then they say, oh, those groups are rats. Those groups deserve to be in a concentration camp after we stole all their money. Now Mervyn King is saying, okay, we've stolen all your money. Now we're going to call you rats, and we're going to put you in concentration camps. And then when you rise up, like in London, when the looters, quote unquote, suddenly sprung out of the woodwork, we'll just hire more cops. Never mind the fact that the entire economy is based on looting. And if you really wanted to grow the economy, Mervyn King, you would have given each one of those looters a banking license and a job at Goldman Sachs and tell them, get on the phone and start making us money.
Not only did we have a new round of 75 billion pounds in quantitative easing, but shock jump in inflation in the UK to 5.2%. Well, here's a tweet. UK inflation should fall back sharply early next year, Bank of England Governor Sir Mervyn King says. So this is a constant extend and pretend monetary policy, because I'm going to show you a headline from January of 2010, nearly 2 years ago, when inflation first jumped to 2.9% in the UK. Shock jump in inflation is a real poser for Mervyn King. In the article, it says, the bank reckons the current spike in inflation will be short-lived and will fall back below target of 2% later this year, suggesting it is in no rush to put the brakes on just yet.
He's lying, because his actions are guaranteeing more inflation. So it's like saying he just punched people in the face and saying that it didn't hurt, and that you shouldn't be bothered when I punch you in the face again. Look, I was on BBC 5 Live, I think 2 months ago, 3 months ago. I told the presenter, point blank, that the policies in the UK are going to cause this spike in inflation. And the way that the end of the interview was, well, thank you for that gloomy assessment. So in the UK, of course, if you speak the truth, it's characterized by the BBC as gloomy, as a downer. Meanwhile, the people are being absolutely zhwanged up the schwing by Mervyn King and his policies of death. What about just saying the truth, BBC? Oh, that's right.
Mervyn King here is saying just another quarter, I promise, is all going to get better. And it doesn't. It doesn't get better because there is no alternative but financial terrorism. And what is the same thing that you see in the political system? People seek a political solution to this banking terrorism. And they keep on saying, oh, just 4 more years of George Bush, and then we'll get a Democrat in there. Oh, now it's just 4 more years of Barack Obama, and it'll all get better, but it never does. And you could see this in the final headlines here, Max. Romney, top 10 campaign contributors. Who's number 1? Goldman Sachs. Number 2, Credit Suisse, then Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, and then rounding up the top 10 is JP Morgan.
Right, more of the same. And they use every crisis to rewrite the laws to make it easier to commit more financial fraud.
Yes, but what I'm saying here by showing this is that Barack Obama is the front runner for the Democrats. His number 1 contributor, Goldman Sachs. Mitt Romney, is the number 1 for the Republicans. Who's his number 1 contributor? Goldman Sachs. So choose either one of them. You're going to get the same, there is no alternative. Tina is the rule of law.
Or how about this Herman Cain character? His past includes a job actually at the Kansas City Fed.
And this final headline here, Max, the only hope on the horizon report. Obama podium teleprompter stolen. So a truck carrying President Barack Obama's podium teleprompter and audio equipment was stolen in Richmond, Virginia. Sources say that about $200,000 of presidential equipment was stolen from Richmond Marriott Hotel.
Yeah.
So Max, this is just perfect karmic justice that the spokesman for the banking industry, the one that just mouths whatever the bankers say,
yeah.
the podium and the teleprompter are stolen. So if we can find a way to prevent any of our political candidates in America or the UK or wherever from actually talking, from actually speaking the words that bankers give them to tell us, the lies that they give them to tell us.
This is why I'm very hopeful about what's happening in Greece. They have it within their ability right now, today, to collapse the European banking system and thus the global banking system. So let's give us their support. All the Occupy movements around the world focus on Greece, what's happening in Athens, and hopefully they can engender a domino effect to collapse the banksters.
All we are saying is let the banks fail.
Well, thank you, Stacy Herbert, for being on every single one of the 200 Keiser reports so far, and I hope we do another 200 or 2,000.
Yeah.
If you want to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, this is Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.